This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Transforming Teen Services webinar. My name is Amelia, and I am the Lifelong Learning Librarian at the Montana State Library. And I'm very excited to be facilitating today's webinar on teen services. Our two speakers for today are Cody Allen from the Billings Public Library and Heather Dickerson from the Lewis and Clark Library. And not only are they leading this webinar, but they will be our fearless leaders for this Transforming Teen Services Train the Trainer project. First, before we get started though, a couple of logistics. This webinar is being recorded and I will be posting the recording to Vimeo so you all can watch it afterwards. There is also a chat box that you can use, and I will be monitoring that throughout the webinar. So if you have any questions, please do pop them in the chat box, and I'll make sure to bring them up for us to discuss. And there are a couple of links in today's webinar, and I will be dropping those in there as well. And at any point, if you have questions, please do put them in the chat box. For today's agenda, we'll first be talking about what is the Transforming Teen Services Train the Trainer project, just to give you some background and some context. And then Heather and Cody will be talking about the specific aspects and topics of the Transforming Teen Services curriculum, as well as how you can request training or receive training at your library. And then we'll also have time for questions at the end and other, things that you all want to talk about. So to give you some background on the Transforming Teen Services project, this is a Train the Trainer project from YALSA and IMLS and COSLA. So YALSA is the Young Adult Library Services Association. COSLA is the Chief Officers of State Library Agencies. And they all got together, and IMLS is the Institute of Museum and Library Services. So IMLS funded this project that started in 2018. And we're participating in the second cohort of this project. And the goal was to bring together frontline staff and state library agencies to provide training on computational thinking, connected learning, and how to apply those specifically to teen services. So the Montana State Library has been interested in working more specifically with teen services, and we thought that this would be a great project for us to be involved in. So we sent Cody and Heather to the Transforming Teen Services training, which happened, I believe, in November, I think. And so they are bringing that knowledge back to Montana and are hoping to share that all with Montana librarians. So next, Cody and Heather will be talking about the curriculum more specifically.
Sure, thanks Amelia. Hi everyone, this is Heather. So before Cody dives in to talk a little bit more about computational thinking, I just wanted to mention that the biggest part of this project is offering unique learning opportunities to our colleagues here in Montana to help do a couple of things. One, integrate more teen programming in your libraries that focus on connected learning and computational thinking. Identify the ways that you're already doing programs with these things, because you are. I promise you, you are, even if you're like, I don't know what those things are. Those things are existing in your libraries already. And then offer trainings for staff to help them feel more comfortable working with teens. One of the things that we find is that people are like, oh, teens, I could never work with teens. And everybody can work with teens. So the next couple of slides are going to give you a sneak peek at what you can expect to get out of a longer training. And at the end, I think everybody's going to keep saying this, we're going to talk about how you can ask us to come see you at your library. So between Cody and I and Amelia, together we need to offer at least 30 hours of training. So we're going to do that in a variety of ways, but we really, really, really want to come and visit you at your library. So with that, Amelia, Cody.
Yeah, hi everyone, so this is Cody, and I'm going to be talking about computational thinking. As Heather has just said, everyone does computational thinking pretty much all the time, and kind of the idea that what this train the trainer program is trying to do is draw attention to the steps of computational thinking, teasing out what that actually is, and then in the vein of once you know what it is and can teach it and get other people to realize that they are also engaging in computational thinking all the time, it allows you to focus and build those skills up in a way that will be helpful. In our sense, we're working with teens, so we want to be able to teach teens the fact that they're engaging in computational thinking and what those steps to computational thinking are, and then they can focus on those and build those skills so that when they go on to college and they enter the workforce and these other things, they will have kind of a ready-made set of skills that they can draw on to help them succeed. So computational thinking in a broad stroke definition is an approach to critical thinking that applies across all disciplines. So unlike connected learning, which Heather's going to talk about next, it has a lot more expansive aspects to it. It's really important to keep in mind that computational thinking is an approach to critical thinking. So it is a way that you engage, address, think about problems and how you solve them. And basically, there's these 4 kind of key steps that we'll talk about here. So Amelia, could we go to the next slide? All right. So in a little bit more narrow definition, computational thinking refers to thought processes used to formulate problems and their solutions that include breaking down problems, looking for patterns, identifying principles, developing instructions. And I'll talk about each of these kind of in turn. So, but again, to start, computational thinking is a process. It is a way of approaching and engaging in problem solving that will lead to better, more efficient, more lasting solutions, ideally, at the end of it. So again, this is something that people do. I think as we go through these things, you'll see clearly how in your own life, in the programs you offer, in the people you interact with, how computational thinking kind of plays out. So the first one is very straightforward, which is breaking down problems into smaller parts. So hopefully it's not difficult to think of a time when you've done this. I would imagine you've probably even done this today. I know I did it this morning when I made coffee. I thought about how am I going to make coffee? How much do I need? How do I do these steps step by step, things like that. So this is really universal. So anytime I think people are handed a project, a program, a problem, almost everyone's initial reaction is to start breaking it down into smaller, more manageable parts. So this could be anything in your library, from someone asking you to design a website, or even to start looking at advertising, how to make advertising more effective, things like this. You'll be given these really broad brushstroke problems, and the only way to kind of go about engaging with them at all is to start breaking them down. So if you want to start looking at how is Facebook affecting your library advertising for programs, I mean, that's such a broad topic. So what you're going to start doing is being like, okay, well, let me start breaking this down a little bit. Let's see how many posts do we have? What are the posts about? How many pictures do we have in our posts? How many funny things? How many clever things? How many things not related to programming at all? And you start breaking it down in these smaller chunks that you can then start managing in a much easier way than you would have if you're trying to do big things all the time. So that's kind of the first step in computational thinking. The next one is looking for patterns. So once you have your problem broken down, you'll start looking for patterns and start looking for things that stick out to you that will be either helpful or harmful for the eventual solution that you want to address. So running with this idea of the social media advertising, once you've broken down that Facebook problem of how are we advertising, what kind of things are we doing, you're gonna start looking for patterns. You're gonna start looking at things and saying, wow, on Wednesdays, when we post a pure text message at 2 p.m., it seems to result in better attendance for programs the next day. And you might also notice that when we start posting on Thursdays at 4 p.m. with pictures, it doesn't seem to be doing anything for the programs that we're advertising. So you'll start noticing these patterns in what you've broken down. And then once you have those, you're going to move on to the third step of computational thinking, which is identifying problems that generate these patterns. So you can start looking at these things like, well, why on Wednesdays at 2, when we just send a simple message that just has text in it, why is this more effective than the pictures that we send out on Thursday? And you might come up with some interesting ideas. It might be that happens to be a time during the lunch break when people are on Facebook and it's easy for them to scroll through and see these things. You might find out that maybe for whatever reason, pictures just aren't as effective at advertising as you would have thought. But what you'll be doing is identifying principles and why those principles are generating the patterns that you found in that last step. And then kind of once you have these principles in place, then you can move on to the final step, which is developing instructions that machines can understand. And this is kind of an oddly worded one, because usually I took this out because I want to draw attention to it. Usually the definition says developing instructions that machines, including people, can understand. And so this is kind of a weird thing with computational thinking, which is that it is developed for machines, and people in this kind of understanding are viewed kind of as machines, as kind of input-output machines, which is where the computational thinking aspect comes from. And this is also, though, at the same time, why I think it's so kind of intuitive and natural to, once you understand these steps, to say, yeah, I do this all the time. That's because it's based on the way humans tend to engage in problems and the way we've built computer science, the way we've built computers to engage in problems, which not surprisingly is kind of mirrored off of human rationality and cognition. So that last step is you're going to be able to develop instructions that machines can understand. So in the social media example, that's could just be simply writing up, if you have a program on X day, then you want to make sure that you have a text message sent out X days beforehand at a certain time, something like that. If you're actually doing computer coding, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You're going to be developing actual code that will be read by a computer, by an actual machine, and then it will output the things that you've told it to do, in the sense of generating those patterns that you want in your broken down parts to generate a solution to this wider problem that you're having. So I'll talk a little bit more later about how this kind of plays out in your own library. But like I said, I hope as I started talking about these 4 parts of computational thinking, I hope almost everyone can think about an aspect or a time in the very recent past when you've been doing these things. I mean, I've essentially been doing this all morning of breaking down problems into smaller parts, looking for patterns. It's just now that I know that these are the 4 parts of computational thinking, I can start drawing attention to them. And for libraries, you can start developing programs centered around these ideas and this computational thinking model. And then again, since we're working with teens and we want them to go on to college and do great things, we want them to enter the workforce and be successful, once they kind of know that these things are happening all the time around them, they can start actively engaging in building these skills. And that's a big part of what this whole Train the Trainer program wants to do, which is get kids learning, get kids thinking about computational thinking and how much they already do it. So with that, I don't think there's any questions yet, so I will hand it off to Heather, who's going to talk to you about connected learning, which is the second part of this whole training.
Cool, thanks, Cody. So Cody's talking about computational thinking as a process. So if we think about CT, computational thinking as process, connected learning is a design goal for our programs and learning experiences in the library. And it's a design goal and approach to education, learning, that prioritizes interests, relationships, and opportunities. Amelia, could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So you can see we've got this really nice Venn diagram that shows us way in the middle there, that's connected learning. It's where we have an intersection of the things that we're really interested about, caring people, teachers, mentors in our life, and opportunities to practice those things that come together. Can I have the next slide, please, Amelia? So here's an example of what connected learning might look like in a human. So we've got Alex. He's really into pop culture, specifically professional wrestling. And then his relationships. So people need support from their peers and mentors to help them get through setbacks and challenges. So Alex has an online community where he can share the things that he's super interested in, his fandom, and then opportunities. So success outside of a traditional classroom requires tangible connections to real world career and civic opportunities. So Alex, because he has had his success with his relationships and writing interests, he then goes on to become a professional writer and gets this opportunity to study writing at a magnet high school. So in your library, maybe you have an Alex who comes to your teen writers group, right? Who starts writing fan fiction about, one little girl at my library wrote about Cars, the movie Cars, and then works with some other kids and they publish a zine together and keep writing. So that's kind of a broad definition of what connected learning can look like. So next slide, please, Amelia. Thank you. So some core properties of a connected learning experience: shared purpose, people coming together. It can be in real life or on a social media platform or a web-based platform. Openly networked, so utilizing the digital tools that we have, and then production centered, so using the things that we're interested in and the resources and the tools that we have to take what we're passionate about and interested in and create something ourselves. No, that's great. I have one more little thing that I want to read about connected learning. And, you know, learning is not something that happens just in the time that we're at school or kids are at school, but instead learning expands beyond formal learning environments to out of school locations like the library. And the learning that teens participate in outside of their formal learning environments offer opportunities for them to expand their horizons. And honestly, it's the thing that kids really connect to the most because it's what they're interested in. It's what they're passionate in. It's the thing that maybe gets an eye roll from their teacher at school because they're talking about this thing that they love again. But really, it's that thing that they love that is going to drive their future success. Cody?
All right, yeah, thanks, Heather. So Heather mentioned that connected learning is a design process compared to computational thinking, which is a lot more of a thought process for how you engage and approach problems. But I would guarantee that you guys have already been doing these things in your library across the board and in either in professional settings with your coworkers or in actual programming with patrons. These things are happening right now, and a big reason why we wanted to do this whole program is that we wanted to draw attention to the fact that this is not going to be anything radically different than what you've been doing in the past. It's just going to involve maybe some tweaking here and there and just drawing attention and teasing things out that these principles have now shown you. So computational thinking, like I said, happens all the time. We had someone chatting with us before the webinar started about Dungeons and Dragons, which at the time I didn't weigh in on, but I'm always happy to talk about D&D and tabletop role-playing games, because there's just a wealth of learning opportunity there. And it's a perfect example of both of these things, actually. So computational thinking is rampant in tabletop role-playing games. So in Dungeons and Dragons, for example, it's a party-based game. You have typically 4 players together as a party, and basically all you're doing outside of when you're in combat is problem solving. All you're doing is having some kind of narrative thread that you have to puzzle out together as a group. So that's going to involve every aspect of computational thinking. So if you're in, let's just say you're running through a dungeon and you're faced with a puzzle, I mean, you're going to have to start breaking things down as a group and be like, okay, so what's the next thing that we want to do? How are we going to get out of this situation? utilizing all the skills of the different players and the classes and the things that they have for their characters. How can we combine all these things? And then they're going to start looking for patterns. They're going to do things in the game and recognize, well, that worked really well. We should probably continue to do this. It'll result in success for this adventure. Or they'll notice, wow, that really didn't go well at all. We should probably not do that anymore if we want to be successful. And then at the same time, as they keep playing, and this is one of the best things about these kinds of games, as the group progresses through an adventure, you see them getting a little bit more close-knit and a little bit more trusting of each other, and they start generating those situations that will result in the patterns they've recognized that result in success. So computational thinking, easy to do, easy to see as if you're just there and looking for it. Connected learning is another one that I feel like most people are doing in a variety of ways. It's just a matter of designing programs to utilize the things Connected Learning offers. Connected Learning also is a research-driven approach. You can look it up. There are some great resources online from it's DML. I forget, they just changed their name to Connected Learning Summit. But there's some great resources you can find. It is, in fact, a research-driven approach. There have been lots of studies done on how effective it is, and Connect Learning does, in fact, result in really resilient, deep knowledge and education. So it is a good thing if you want people to really learn. Connect Learning is a good way to go about it. But again, in the library, what does it look like? Well, of those three kind of tiers of Connected Learning, which was interest, relationships, and opportunities, interest, you don't really have to worry about, right? I mean, you have to advertise and try different things and get interested parties in there, but interest is going to be generated from the teens themselves. Not to say that you can't generate interest in a teen, like that's one of the best parts of being a librarian, but for the most part, they're going to come ready. They're going to come wanting to engage in something that they're interested in. Relationships clearly is a big aspect of what we want to do as teen librarians, as librarians at large. We want to be able to foster a culture, foster an environment in which people feel safe, in which people feel like they can take risks and do things they might not be able to do in school when they have a grade that depends on their projects and what they do. That's not the case in the library. We are more concerned about them as an individual. So we want to help support them, help them find the resources that they need to be successful and to flourish. And that's a big part of what we want to do. So what that could look like in the library is that you design a program. Let's just say it's a creative writing program. You have people coming in, clearly they're interested in creative writing. That's why they're there. You may talk a few teens into it as it happens. I know I do this a lot. I convince teens to try something they wouldn't want to do otherwise, and they really like it. But then you're going to start developing those relationships. You might do a one-time program, or you might start doing a weekly or a monthly group meeting, whatever it kind of looks like, but you want to start offering these kinds of creative relationships in this context that will help keep them invested and keep them interested and keep them realizing that what they're interested in has value and that it has value to them and to their community at large. And then there's opportunities. So this one is where you have to get really creative as a librarian. So that could be just that group that you have meeting every so often at the library, or it could result in something where you're actually connecting these teens to local professionals, to people who are doing what they're interested in for a living, people who have the relevant skill set of what these teens want. I know, for example, for me, a big part of my job is trying to find experts that has the literal skills that teens want to learn, so that not only are they getting to see these professionals in their kind of field and the way that they work, but they get very high quality lessons and very high quality education from these people in particular. You know, and it's happened here where I've done, for example, 3D printing programs, and they go fine. They go very well. I am perfectly happy to get kids started, to teach them kind of the ropes and how these programs work. But every so often, we try to bring in architects to lead the 3D design workshop, and it's much, much more engaging because they're the ones there who can actually answer questions about what it's like to do this for a living. And also, just the way that they talk about it, the way they talk about, for example, you know, visual imagery and visual communication in 3D design, it's much more in depth than the things that I can kind of offer. So it's that time when I, as a librarian, can connect these teens and give them the opportunities that they need to succeed. And like I said, ideally to go on and study this more in college, to enter the workforce kind of ready to engage with these skills. But again, computational thinking and connected learning, there are things that you can do very easily in your library. Computational thinking, you've been doing it already. Connected learning is just a matter of designing your programs in a specific way to set kids up for success as much as you can. And then I think we can go on to the next slide. So yeah, so that is a brief overview of the things that we're going to be focusing on in the next year and a half or so with these trainings. And we're going to try to make them as available to everyone as possible. I mean, that the whole idea is that Heather and I have received this training. We have brought the information back with us, and now it is time to start sharing it with all of you across the state. So there's a lot of ways you can get involved and receive this training. The trainings will kind of vary depending on where we are and what context we're in and what we've offered in the past. But we're going to be starting, I think, well, offline is technically our first one, and we're doing that next week. We didn't put that on the slide, obviously, because it's in 8 days, 9 days from now.
It's in 4 days. It's on Saturday.
Oh my
it's
gosh.
really soon.
That's right.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
super soon.
That's right. It is this week, not next week. Yeah. Okay. So 4 days away. So if you're going to offline, great. We will be there. You can receive the first training there. After that, though, MLA is our next planned training. So we're going to have one, as you can see on the slide, Friday, April 3rd at 4:15 at MLA. We'll also be at fall workshops. Details of that have not been nailed down yet, but ideally we'll be at fall workshops. And then we'll be doing periodic webinars and regional trainings. So this is our kind of introductory webinar. We just want to talk to everyone about the project and the big concepts we'll be focusing on. But we'll be doing more of these every so often. So just keep an eye out on the Montana State Library Communications. If you want one in particular, definitely let us know. Email Amelia, Heather, or I. We will be happy to put something together and do another one for the whole state. We'll be doing regional trainings periodically. So Heather is up in Helena. I'm here in Billings. We realize Montana is a big state. We realize not everyone can travel far distances all the time or even some of the time. So we're going to do our best to kind of offer regional trainings for people to come in if they're available to come in and get these trainings. And then we can also request visits. And I don't know if Amelia and Heather want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So we would love to come visit you and do kind of all of the things. If you have a staff meeting, a staff day away, you want to do a half day, a full day, and really kind of dive deep into what it means to embrace computational thinking in your work, or to revisit your program design with connected learning principles in mind. Amelia has made a great SurveyMonkey request form, so you can say, hey, we want to do this, maybe these couple of days, and then we'll work to figure it out. We can travel. That's the word. We can travel. Also, if there are smaller libraries, 1, 2, 5 people that work together, if you want to get together with a different smaller library in your area, we can get maybe some more bang for our buck. Amelia, do you want to add anything?
No, that sounds great. I did drop the request form for training into the chat box, so you guys can click on that SurveyMonkey link, and that will be open it's on a rolling basis, so we'll be checking that, and any requests that you put in, Heather, Cody, and I will be talking over that. Just to let you know, it would be helpful if you submit a variety of dates for requesting training, just to give us some flexibility with scheduling. But yeah, we do encourage you to reach out to the libraries in the area, see if you want to do something together. And as Heather and Cody mentioned, we're able to kind of tailor this to the length and the kind of topics that you guys are interested in learning more about. I've also dropped in the MSL webpage on Transforming Teen Services, so you can take a look at that. There's more information there on the project itself from YALSA, the press release, the grant proposals. So if you want to learn a little bit more about that, you're more than welcome to. And we'll probably be adding some resources there about connected learning and computational thinking. So we can post those links in there as well. But yeah, as we mentioned, we have money, we're willing to travel, and we are hoping to also schedule trainings at places that librarians will also be at, like MLA and fall workshops. So please
Amelia,
do take advantage. Yes, Jeannie?
do you have a limit on how many people you think, sometimes workshops can get too big? We sit right between Butte and Bozeman. So when we host stuff here, we not only draw from the libraries in the south of us, but we also draw from both bigger libraries, because I would love to host one in Whitehall, but I
That'd
need
be
to know
great.
if you have a limit.
Well, I don't, Cody,
It's
Heather, I
not
don't
a
think so.
TBD, Jeannie. I think we would have to look at, if all of a sudden there are like 20 people registered and it's just maybe me doing the training, but I don't, not yet. There's not a limit yet. That
Yeah,
would be a really good problem to have.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm asking because last time I did a computer training, we had 35 people here.
Oh, wow.
And so with the computers and stuff, that was about what we could do. And I didn't know what kind of resources you were bringing.
I mean,
Do you need play space? Do you need,
yeah, I mean, we do have the computer lab and the tablet lab from the state library that we're able to use. I mean, any of the equipment that the state library has available, as long as we just reserve it in advance. I mean, I think actually probably a big limitation would be the space that you all have at the library.
we have a
And
whole
then,
basement.
yeah, so I think, if you just want to reach out and see who's interested, and then we can go from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know the training. I mean, when we had the training, it was done with lots of people, so it's definitely doable. As Heather said, it'd be a lot for one person maybe if we have 20 plus, but we're happy to basically make it work as much as we can. So yeah, I would say at this point, this may change in the future. I will add that caveat, but at this point, as Heather said, yes, no caps as far as we know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Cody and I are pretty passionate about teen services and about helping everybody just serve the youth in our community to the best of their ability. So I think we're willing to work with a lot of uncertainty to make these trainings happen and make it what everybody wants.
Terrific.
Any other questions? Heather and Cody have also included their contact information on the slide, and I'll be sending out the slides afterwards for you all to take a look at too. But yeah, feel free to drop any questions in the chat box or unmute yourself if you wish. That's, I think, all the information that we have today. So Cody, Heather, and I will stay on for a little bit longer if anyone wants to discuss and throw some ideas out there. Otherwise, feel free to take a look at the resources, take a look at the survey, and reach out if you do have anything else you'd like to discuss further. But yeah, thank you all so much for coming, and I'll go ahead and pause the recording now.